In this video number 11, we're going to cover a couple of very specific topics related to executing your portfolio strategy. We're going to talk about how do you allocate your investments between your taxable and tax-free accounts. I want to talk about a few alternatives to fixed income. In the previous video, we talked about mutual funds and exchange-traded funds, but there are a couple other places you can put your fixed income investments. I want to show you an Excel spreadsheet that helps you establish an investment plan so you know exactly what your target is to invest each month. And then a little bit of time about longevity risk and immediate annuities. So the allocation between taxable and tax-free accounts. First of all, we can't just look at current tax law and optimize around that. The reason is tax laws change dramatically over time, and we know in the United States we have a very large government deficit. Our government is going to need a lot more tax revenue in the future. So I think everything's very uncertain, very perilous. A good example is the Roth IRA. People love the Roth IRA, even though you don't get a tax deduction today. According to current tax laws, a Roth IRA is tax-free forever. You'll never pay any taxes on earnings in your Roth IRA according to current tax law. However, if the government is desperate for tax revenue 10, 20 years from now, there's a good chance they could look at the Roth IRA and see that people have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars sitting there tax-free, and they could change the tax law and suddenly those could become taxable. The other issue people have are the different types of taxes that the government levies. There's ordinary income tax, which applies to our earnings on our jobs. Then there are a couple of taxes that are specific to investments. There's dividends that you get from your stocks and your mutual funds. Those are taxed at maybe a different rate than ordinary income, or the same rate. It depends. Tax law changes over time. And there is also what we call capital gains. A capital gain is you buy a stock for $50, you sell it 3 years later for $70. That's a $20 capital gain. That's usually taxed at a much lower rate than ordinary income and dividends, but not always. The conventional wisdom is to put stocks in the tax-free account and fixed income in taxable accounts. I agree with that because most people believe stocks will earn more than fixed income over time, and so you want your higher earning investment in your tax-free accounts because then you're shielding more tax. The challenge for that assumption can be in something like your 401k plan. When you have a 401k plan, you don't pay tax today as your employer puts money into the account. But when the account matures and you retire and you take money out, suddenly that 401k plan is taxed as ordinary income. So when you put stocks into your 401k plan, you are essentially going to convert a capital gains tax into ordinary income. It's still probably better to have the stocks in the tax-free account, even though the tax rate is going to be higher on ordinary income than on capital gains. You're probably going to be shielding a whole lot more gains over time, and that deferral of tax, not paying tax for 20, 30 years, that's more going to offset than the difference in the tax rates between capital gains and ordinary income. But it is a challenge. It's very hard to model because if you model it, the model will tell you what the optimal solution is, but that's only given current tax law. As tax laws change over time, you can definitely get a very different answer. You definitely want to put options in a tax-free account, especially if you have a Roth IRA. Options are taxed in a way that is very unfavorable to the taxpayer. So if you can get an account that's entirely tax-free, like a Roth IRA, options are a great place because they can create large gains that are taxable immediately, or they can create large losses that you're not allowed to deduct from your taxes. And if you have a tax-free account, that avoids all of that confusion and tax law complexity. Fixed income tends to work well in taxable accounts, especially If your tax rate is high and you want to shield some of that fixed income by using tax-exempt securities, that's perfect for a taxable account. Let's talk about fixed income alternatives. So if you're going to have your fixed income in your taxable account, you can buy bond mutual funds. That's perfectly fine, but there's a few other alternatives you should consider. The top left is a deferred annuity. I have this for USAA, but you can find these in any insurance companies. A deferred annuity is essentially you're just investing in essentially a fixed income security. The beauty of it is all the earnings are tax deferred. They're not tax-free. You'll pay tax when you take the money out, or at retirement. There's a point where you have to start taking the money out. But until then, especially if you're in your 20s and 30s and 40s, you have a good few decades that you can have the money build up in a deferred annuity, completely tax deferred. You don't pay tax until you take it out. You can see the rates here for a 3-year, 5-year, and 10-year. It's interesting now the yield curve is inverted, so the 3-year is actually a higher rate than the 10-year. That's not the norm. The next one is banks. Banks certificates of deposits, very simple securities. I pulled up a page from what's called bankrate.com. Bankrate.com is a great resource that shows you the highest CD rates in the country. These are all FDIC insured. You can see member FDIC, which gives you tremendous protection up to $250,000, and you can even get more than that by how you structure it. You can see the rates they have for a 5-year CD. The highest rate, First National Bank of America right now is 465, very similar to the 445 for the insurance company, but slightly higher. Then you have mutual funds. We talked about mutual funds. Here's a Vanguard mutual fund. Its current yield is 5.35%. And then the last one is a Vanguard tax-exempt fund. So this is a fund that is tax-exempt. So if you buy this in your taxable account, you do not have to pay tax on the earnings. Its current yield is 4.18%. So right now, the deferred annuity, 5-year deferred annuity at 4.45%, it has the worst rate, the lowest rate. The bond mutual fund has the highest at 5.35, but we have this tax exempt that's 4.18, but we don't pay tax on that. So what we do is to try to get this tax exempt so we can compare it to the other three, we do something called a tax equivalent yield. We take the yield on the tax exempt bond, which is 4.18%, and we divide it by 1 minus our marginal tax rate. The marginal tax rate is the rate we'll pay in taxes on the next dollar we earn. And let's say you expect your adjusted income for taxes to be between $45,000 and $95,000. That means your marginal tax rate is 22%. If you're married, joint, then it's a higher amount. So you'd have to see which you fall in, but for individuals, that's the number. And so when we adjust for that, the 4.18% divided by 1 minus 0.22, we get 536. So what that means is this fund, before tax you make 418, but this fund at 535, you have to pay tax on that. What is the equivalent for this 418 when we adjust for the tax rate? And that's 536. You can see they're very, very, very close. You'd probably be somewhat indifferent between the two. You might put a little in either one, or split it 50-50 between the two. You just want to watch it over time and see which has the better rate adjusted for your marginal tax rate. The last few years, tax exempt has looked extremely favorable. Right now, it's a wash if your tax rate is 22%. If your tax rate's higher than 22%, the tax exempt looks like a very good investment for a tax-efficient investor who wants to shield tax and make more after tax. That's tax-exempt bond fund. Looks like a really good yield. If your tax rate's below 22%, you probably don't want to do any tax-exempt, because even though it's tax shielded, you don't have to pay tax on it. After you adjust for tax rates, you'll make more in the taxable bond. Now, does this change over time? It absolutely does. The mutual funds, the corporate bond index fund, and the tax-exempt bond fund, they're going to give you whatever current interest rates are. It's just whatever the market is giving you. But insurance companies and banks, they're unusual entities. There's more going on with these entities than just what the current market is doing. So I've noticed with insurance companies, especially August, September, they tend to have unusually high rates. I remember in 1 year I bought a few deferred annuities just because the rates were ridiculously high. I bought them from the company I worked for, and I asked the people who priced them, why were their rates so high? And they said they weren't meeting their sales goal for the year, so they needed to push a few so they could hit their sales target. So they were offering ridiculously high rates, much higher than mutual fund rates, because they wanted to get more into those accounts just so they can make some sales goal. But that's the kind of non-economic, irrational thinking some of these companies have, and you can take advantage of it. The same thing with banks. I've seen some banks that offer just ridiculously high CD rates just because they need some money to fund loans or whatever. Right now, that's not the case. Right now, you're probably going to do better if you just buy a bond mutual fund. You'll probably get the best rates, at least at the time I did this video. But you can easily get all this data. The deferred annuities, just go to a life insurance company and look for the product that says deferred annuities. For banks, go to bankrate.com. For mutual funds, you can see I just got these by going to vanguard.com, pulling up the mutual fund, and then just this data is listed at the top of the page for that mutual fund. One item to mention here is with the life annuity, because annuities are tax deferred, you see that 5-year FGG has a rate of 4.45% versus the mutual fund that's 5.35%. The mutual fund gets taxed every year, but the 5-year annuity will not get taxed until sometime in the future. It gets really complicated, but the 445 is actually better than 445 because of the advantage of tax deferral. How advantageous is it? Well, it depends on how old you are when you start taking it out. It's not that you have to, in 10, 20 years, take the money out of the annuity and pay all your tax all at once. The IRS actually allows you to take it out over time, over your remaining life expectancy, if you take out the money starting at a certain age. You have to start at age 70. You can't leave it in there longer than that. And if you start it too early, you can pay a penalty tax. It gets complicated, but how valuable is the tax deferral? If your marginal tax rate is only maybe 10% or so, it adds 0.1 to 0.2%, depending on how long into the future you're looking at. If you have a high tax rate, it could add quite a bit, maybe as much as 0.7%. Even with that, if we add 0.7%, you're still below where the mutual fund yield is. So right now, the annuity, even adjusted for the tax deferral, still does not come close to the mutual fund. If they were both around 5.2, 5.3%, the annuity would make more sense because of the advantage of tax deferral, but it's not an easy equation to figure out. The math can be quite complex. Now I want to talk about establishing an investment plan, and here's where I'm going to do some Excel. What this Excel spreadsheet does is let you know how much you need to invest every month so that when you retire, you will have enough money to live through your retirement. Here are the assumptions you need to put in. What rate of return will you make on your investments? Is that an after-tax or before-tax rate? It depends. If all of your money is in Roth IRAs or in 401k plans, the before and after is the same until you retire, so it can get really complicated. It's a very simplified approach. What inflation do you assume? The Federal Reserve says they're targeting 2%. If you want to use a higher number to be safe, that's fine, but the higher your inflation rate, the more you will have to save, because that means you'll be spending more in retirement. The person I'm planning for here, her name is Carol. She's 25. She wants to retire at 62. And she wants to plan her retirement to age 95. That's her longevity. She doesn't expect to live that long. Her life expectancy might be 85 to 90 years old, but she added an extra 5 years on top of that just to be safe. What I like to ask people is not how much will you need when you retire to live on, But if you were to retire today, what budget would you need to today be comfortable? The model will then inflate that to future prices given inflation, but most people can't think in future terms with inflation. Instead, think today what you need. Now, does she need $40,000 in total, or is that $40,000 on top of what she expects to get from Social Security or other sources? That's why this is a simplified spreadsheet. It gives you a ballpark of what you need. Those adjustments you would have to make in your assumptions to adjust for other offsetting factors. What this spreadsheet does then is simply walk you through the math. I'm using a combined text and numbers. If you look at this 40,000, if I change the 40,000 to 50,000, everything's automatically updated. I'm going to stick with 40,000, but you can change any of these numbers and it automatically does the update for you. If you want to see exactly what the model is doing, this will walk you through each of the steps. First thing it's going to say is how much income does she need at age 62 to cover her expenses? And that is $83,000. In today's dollars, it was $40,000. But when she retires at age 62, that $40,000 today will need to be $83,000 at age 62 in order to buy the same amount of stuff, to have the same purchasing power. The next question is, how much will she need at age 62 so she can produce an income of $83,000 growing with inflation for the rest of her life? And that amount is $1,741,470. If you want to see the math for that, it's here. All the math is there. Then the question is, how much does she need to invest on a monthly basis? And you can see that amount is $1,360. I have something in the spreadsheet. You can see the sheet that's called Test Calculations. It shows her at age 25 starting with no portfolio and investing $1,360 a month. You can see she does that throughout her career. She has an ending portfolio that's growing with her investments plus her investment earnings. You can see at some point her investment earnings quickly become larger than what she's investing. So somewhere in her 30s, her portfolio will produce more interest, more income than she's actually investing. That goes on obviously until she turns 62. When she turns 62, there's that $1.7 million ending portfolio. Then she starts taking money out to pay for her expenses. Why? Because she no longer is going to be able to invest because she's retired. She doesn't have a job. She can't invest every month. And you'll see that money's going to come out. Her portfolio for a while will grow faster than what she's taking out. But at some point, the inflation and what she's taking out is going to take over, and you can see her portfolio starts shrinking. It does pretty well into her 60s and 70s, but then in her 80s, you start noticing that her portfolio is starting to shrink pretty quickly. Sometime in her late 80s, it drops below $1 million, and then it starts falling really fast. And so at age 95, she essentially runs out of money at that point. Now, one big problem I have with this spreadsheet is it assumes at age 25, she's going to invest $1,360 every month. Very few people, when they're 25 years old, are going to be able to invest that much. So what most people will do, they'll invest a smaller amount when they start out and then let that grow as they get raises over time. So I have another sheet called Growing Contribution. And what we do is we plug in what her target portfolio is at $1,741,470. And here you just have any number, let's say $800. If she invested $800, her portfolio would grow to $2.8 million. She doesn't need $2.8 million. She only needs $1.7 million. What this spreadsheet does is it takes this beginning investment amount and grows it at 5%. So she's going to say, hey, I'm going to start with an amount. We don't know what that amount is. I started with $800. That's too much. But she's going to start with an amount that she'll contribute every year, and then that's going to grow 5% as she gets 5, 6, 7% raises every year. So how do I figure out how much this $800 should be? And if you go up in Excel, it says Data, and then What If Analysis, Goal Seek. What you want to do is set column F and row 2, F2, you want to set that to 0 by changing how much she invests every month starting. And you can see that's $491. She can probably handle that, especially if she has a 401k plan. If your employer is matching you dollar for dollar, then that $491 really only needs to be about $250. So if she starts with $491, that's going to grow every year. That $491 is about $5.9 thousand this first year, and that's going to grow 5%. And then when she turns 62 in 2063, she'll have that 1.7 million. So this spreadsheet helps you do that, so you're not putting 1360 into a portfolio every month when you're only 22 years old. Let me show you this graphically, what we just did. Here's her plan. She wants to have $40,000 when she retires in income, but that's in today's dollars. That's going to be a much higher number in the future. She's 25 today. She wants to retire at 62, and then she's going to assume she needs money through age 95. So age 25, she's going to have several years of accumulating a portfolio. At age 62, she'll start taking money out, and if she plans it just right, she'll live to 95, and that's right when her portfolio will turn to 0. Looking at the numbers, if she invests $1,360 a month, earning 5%, that will grow to $1.7 million when she retires. She'll take out $83,000, but that's going to grow with inflation at 2%, and when she turns 95, she runs out of money. We adjusted it so this $1,360 was below $500, but then growing over time. I just don't have it in here. But that's a financial plan. You will have to update it over time because your portfolio might not make 5%, it might make 7% or 4%. Inflation might change. You might see a higher inflation number. There's all kinds of things that can change. Each year or each couple of years, you update it, adjust your plan. You might have to give more, or you might be able to give less to hit your plan. But this gives you a ballpark of where to start so you know how much to save. If you're conservative, maybe you change your assumptions to be more conservative, or if your plan says to invest $500 a month and you can do $700, then do $700. But it gives you a ballpark so you know you're on track, and each year you can update it to make sure you're still on track. The last thing I want to talk about is longevity risk and how to manage longevity risk. What if Carol didn't live to be 95? What if she lived to be 98 or 102? That means she would run out of money when she turns 95. What does she do next? Longevity risk is a serious risk, and there are a couple of ways to manage this. One is an immediate annuity, which is very available in the insurance world. The other is longevity annuities. They are not available the way I like them. I'll show you the one I think makes a lot of sense, but it does not exist yet. I'm trying to get some of my students to start a company to sell this product, but I'll show you that as well. So let's start with an immediate annuity. An immediate annuity is you go to a life insurance company, you give them some money. Here I have it set up that you give them $500,000, and what they will do is they will give you a monthly income until you die. So if you live 5 years, they give you monthly income for 5 years. If you live 50 years, if Carol lives to be 110, they'll keep paying her until she dies. That protects you from longevity risk because the insurance company continues to pay you no matter how long you live. So you cannot run out of money. Now the downside is it's a fixed payment. It does not grow with inflation. There are some products that grow with inflation, but that's such a high risk for insurance companies. They tend not to be very good annuities. They tend to have to cut so much out of the annuity to provide you that inflation protection that it's almost not worth it. But you could shop around and see. This is a fixed annuity in that it's a fixed payment every month until you die. So this was set up for me. I used, again, USA to do this, but most insurance companies will have this on their website. You just look for an immediate annuity. When you go in, they'll have your age and your gender. You tell them how much you want to invest up front. when you're going to start taking the payment out. I did it immediately. And then they'll tell you how much they can give you every month until you die. I do it, period, uncertain if it is a true life annuity. That means if I die tomorrow, I get nothing. But if I live for 50 years, I get 27, 95, 70 for the rest of my life. Some people don't like that. They say, if I give you $500,000 and I die tomorrow, I get nothing and you get my $500,000. So some people want period certain. They say, I want to get that $2,795 for at least 10 years. If you do that, that's going to reduce that monthly payment. So there's some options you have to look at. If you don't have dependents, or if you're just saving for yourself, you don't mind that if you only lived for 2 or 3 years, you'd lose that entire rest of that $500,000. Your best is just to do a true life annuity that pays you until you die, that will give you the highest monthly income. Essentially, this is what Social Security is. Social Security pays you an income until you die. The advantage of Social Security is that it is adjusted for inflation. So Social Security is actually a quite lucrative immediate annuity. You should look into when to start taking it, because you can get a much better annuity if you're very healthy. If you delay your Social Security until you're 70 or 72, the monthly income is much higher, plus you get that inflation protection. Some firms have pension plans. A pension plan, they're not as popular today, and most firms have shut them down, but a lot of state governments and city governments have pension plans. What they do is you work for the firm or work for the entity over time, you accumulate a pension plan, and when you retire, they guarantee you a monthly income, often adjusted for inflation. So you may already have something like this with either a pension plan from your employer or Social Security. You probably do not want to put 100% of your investment portfolio in one of these. I recommend that people maybe cover their living expenses with an annuity. If you need at a minimum $2,000 a month to pay all of your bills, then maybe you do an immediate annuity to provide that $2,000 a month. The next thing I want to go over is a longevity annuity. These do exist from insurance companies, but they're very poorly structured. I'm going to show you in Excel how I like them to be set up. But essentially what you do is over your lifetime, you pay a monthly premium to the insurance company during your working years. And those who die before a certain age, they receive nothing. They lose all of their money. But at maturity, those at advanced age, they receive a large payout. And the later you put that certain age, the more you'll make. So if you start paying into this at age 25, and you pay into it until you retire at age 62, but you don't get a large payout unless you make it to 95, you will get a huge large payout at age 95, because most people will die before age 95, and you would get to keep all of their money. Those who die early subsidize those who live a long time. It's the exact opposite of life insurance. With life insurance, you pay a monthly premium. If you die, you get a large payout. But if you live, you don't get the payout. And what happens with life insurance, most people live, and the few people who die, they get huge payouts, because all the people who live, you get all of their money. So a longevity annuity is just the exact opposite of life insurance. With life insurance, everybody pays in. The people who die get all the money from the people who don't die. With longevity annuity, everybody pays in. The people who die early get nothing, but those who live a long time get a large payout. So what I did in this particular file is, this is back into my investment plan, and what I'm showing you is the original file I showed to Carol where she started investing, but you notice she's not investing the $1,360 she had before. She's only investing $1,335. Where's the difference going? The difference is a premium going into her longevity annuity. She's going to put $25 a month into this longevity annuity. Now over time, you see the same thing we saw before. Her portfolio is not quite as large as before because she's only investing $1,335. Over time, her portfolio builds, just like we saw before. When she turns 62, her portfolio is not quite as large as before. It's $1.7 million, but a little bit less because she invested $25 less a month. And then as she gets closer and closer to age 95, and here I actually set it up that the immediate annuity pays at age 90. So if she's alive at age 90, she will get 1.8 or $1.9 million from the longevity annuity. If she dies any time before that, she gets nothing. So only the people who lived at age 90 get this. But for $25 a month during her working years, she sets that aside. If she makes it to age 90, she'll get $1.9 million paid to her by the insurance company. And as you notice there, when she hits age 95, her portfolio doesn't go to zero. She still has quite a bit of money left. And so now, because she got that large payout from the annuity, now you can see her portfolio lasts until age 113. So make it to 113 years with this longevity annuity. I wish the insurance industry would sell these. I want to create a product that combines the investment with the longevity annuity so the customer doesn't really notice that $25 a month that's being set aside. But they definitely notice it if they make it to age 90. I think it's a wonderful product. I wish the insurance industry would sell it. They just don't sell this product. I think it's a great product. But the actuaries argue no one wants to put $25 away a month over 20, 30 years and then lose all of that and get nothing for it. But that's the same thing life insurance is. If you buy a 20-year term policy, you pay the premiums for 20 years, and if you don't die, you get nothing. So people are very comfortable with that on life insurance. For some reason, actuaries don't think people would be comfortable with that with a longevity annuity. I wanted to show you some very special topics related to retirement that I think are critically important, and hopefully this Excel spreadsheet will give you a way to sit down and do your own analysis.